that that employees have faced. But now it seems as though we're entering a new phase of this situation. Our goal today is really to share the lessons learned, to talk about some of the successes, some of the blind spots that that our panelists have faced and how they worked through those. And as we now enter the new phase, what the emerging trends that they see. The key theme today is how to take employee feedback and to turn that into data-backed action. A quick reminder that my colleague CJ will be monitoring our chat line, and so please remember to submit questions for our amazing panelists. We're going to carve out as much time at the end of this session to address your questions, and we're also recording today's conversation, and we will be distributing the recording to everyone that is participating. With that said, let me go ahead and introduce you to the lineup for today. I'm so fortunate to have two amazing humans with me. I have so much respect for the individuals that are joining this conversation. First, we have Jill Godfrey. She is the Chief People Officer at Storable. Jill is from the UK, where she spent the first part of her career with Virgin Retail. And it really was with Virgin where she developed her love for the art and science of HR, which is something that a passion I share with Jill. Most recently, she has been at Storable and has been playing a critical role in leading that organization through a ton of M&A activity, combining 4 businesses into one unified brand and culture. Jill, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Stephen. Good to be here.
Next up, we have Zach Stanfield, the VP of Human Resources at Lycans Energy. Zach has spent his career working in the financial services and oil and energy industries. He has led his organizations through a variety of different growth cycles, organic growth, growth through acquisition. He is also passionate about helping companies develop and evolve their corporate culture and fostering environments that enable strong employee feedback and communication. Thanks for joining us, Zach.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thanks, Stephen.
So I'm really excited about today's conversation. One of the things that I'm most excited about is that our panelists are really going to bring 2 unique perspectives. And it really comes back to the nature of the business that Jill and Zach represent. Jill will be bringing the perspective from high tech, given that Storable's core business is providing a world-class technology platform in the self-storage industry. Zach, on the other hand, will be bringing the viewpoint from more traditional oil and gas industry. Lycans Energy Solutions provides fuel and heating solutions across 15 states. So we're going to have a great range of experiences. Some of the things that have worked for Jill, and Storable, are unique to their business, and Zach is going to be sharing things that may be a little different, that's more appropriate that's been more appropriate for Lycans Energy. So we're going to have a great conversation, and thanks again to Zach and Jill for joining us. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. The first place that I wanted to start today is just looking at the bigger picture. Having personally worked through 9/11 and also the financial meltdown, I thought I had experienced a lot, and I thought I had experienced and worked through a ton as an HR executive, but I truly have never experienced anything like this. And I just thought it would be interesting to get the panel viewpoint. What is your response to this statement? We've never experienced anything like this before. Zach, what's your reaction?
Sure. So I would agree. We've never experienced anything like this before. I probably would add a couple exclamation points at the end of that statement. I think that lots of companies have strategic teams, like response teams or disaster recovery teams that they've had in place, and they have a playbook. That playbook has things for, natural disaster, power outages, maybe some key personnel that if they pass away, but nobody had that chapter to flip to in their book that said virus pandemic. So we all kind of started at ground zero and had to really lean on each other and work day by day with our local officials. So one of the nice things, we're in multiple states, but our main office and headquarters is in Ohio. We worked really closely with our state officials, our governor and lieutenant governor, our disaster response team kicked into action day one. We've met every day since then, reviewing the day before and where we're going ahead. We were on the phone with the lieutenant governor one time during one of our meetings, talking with him. So that communication that we had with our local government really helped throughout our experience of trying to get through this uncharted territory.
Awesome. Jill, what's your response?
Probably a little different from Zach in the sense that relatively young company, relatively small, probably compared to the amount of employees that Zach has. So we didn't have a plan, whether it was for the pandemic or whether it was for a crisis. And so actually what we've done through this is written the book. So one of the things that we've done is actually recorded action that's been taken throughout the process, whether that's been how we pivoted to remote from an IT standpoint, what we did from an HR standpoint, how we've communicated with clients through the process. And we've actually documented all of it. We're updating that on a daily basis so that now hopefully we have the playbook for other emergencies as well. But Stephen, to your question, never experienced anything like it. I've experienced crises before, to Zach's point. And I think perhaps the learning for us through the process has been how we've kind of reverted back to, okay, when we did those previous crises, how did we communicate? What did we do differently from a meeting cadence? How do we need to step up the communication to employees, to clients, etc.? And so we've never dealt with a global pandemic, we never have to again. So all the tried and tested methodologies that we've used before in previous emergencies have definitely come into play. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you know, I'm sure your organizations are very grateful for everything that you two have done. The next kind of macro question that I wanted to pose to you guys relates more to the lasting impact that this is going to have. And Josh Bersin has recently been quoted, and Josh is a pundit in the kind of HR tech community. He's been quoted by saying, you know, the coronavirus is accelerating one of the biggest business transformation in decades. And, you know, I agree with this statement somewhat, given that, you know, having seen, you know, feedback through the engagement surveys and the platform that we offer, you know, a trend for the last, you know, call it 5 years has been, you know, working from home, and many companies, you know, have resisted that. And this overnight changed that dynamic where companies suddenly had to put a remote working kind of policy in place. And so that's one example. But the view is that this could be changing the way we do business in the decades to come. And so I'm curious, again, let's start with Zach. You know, what is your view on this statement that this is going to have a lasting impact?
Yeah, no doubt this is going to have a lasting impact. You know, I think you can look at this in multiple levels, especially coming from our point of view, that there's the employee perspective, there's a financial perspective, and financial in the sense of how we do business with our customers. Do we change our operations on how we interact? Do we require signatures? How do we provide paperwork to them? Is it mailed? Is it emailed? We looked at it at a marketing perspective on how we're going to move going forward. Maybe kind of cultivating on the opportunity to get some additional email addresses so that we can provide things in a less physical form and an electronic form, and then we can use those to market going forward. But I think one of the biggest transformations was all of our work locations, all the physical changes that happened from maybe rearranging the desks to the products that we provided, to the methods in which we're communicating, from using our intra-office team, to daily calls with people, to hotlines, to email hotlines that are monitored 24/7. Right off the get-go, we even branded, as you saw all across the TV commercials now, we're in it together. So we branded Lichens together, hashtag Lichens together. So there's t-shirts with Lichens hashtag. All of our marketing materials have been branded across the board for everybody. So I think that the lasting transformation here is that there's not, that new normal is going to be different for people when they come back to work. Some of the people that have returned have even mentioned that there's some changes, but it's changes outside of work and inside of work. So yeah, this is one of the biggest transformations we've seen here at Likens.
And Joe, I'm curious, what's your view on the new normal and what's to come?
I think our situation, perhaps like many of the folks who are listening to us, has been a little different from Zach's, in the sense that we pivoted pretty quickly to 100% remote work. And I wouldn't say that our company was necessarily the most progressive when it came to remote workers, but a few people would do it from time to time. So overnight, we pivoted to 400 people remotely. And it's been a remarkable transformation, absolutely remarkable. I think we've over-indexed deliberately on communication. And so the communication has been fast, it's been frequent. I think we've learned some really valuable lessons about how to use Zoom. So previously, if you had been in an office, we would have required each person, if they were in the office, to be in one office, and then other people might come in on Zoom calls. What we found in the last 7 weeks is that the intimacy of Zoom has actually brought our 4 office locations, all of which are in different states, much, much closer together. And so some of the change management and M&A activity that we've been doing in the last year or so, actually, I think it's sped up. I actually think it's increased communication and trust. I think we're thinking differently about how we use our space. We haven't yet said when we're going to go back to work. And even when we do go back, I think how we use that space is going to change significantly. We're thinking about whether do we still need a 26,000 square foot office, given that people are managing this very well, and actually productivity in some areas of the business has increased. So again, many lessons to be learned, but I believe that from a communication standpoint, from a use of tools standpoint, I don't think that's ever going to be the same again. And I don't think that you'll see that many businesses from a high-tech standpoint who are necessarily going out there and signing leases on 30,000 square feet.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to hear your response, Jill. We've made the decision, the Workify leadership team, that we are following companies like Envision, and we've actually implemented a remote working policy indefinitely. And we're still relatively small in the grand scheme of things. And we had a similar experience in that communication levels, everything just increased, empathy, proactive communication. But if I allow you to retort, Zach, you're not actually, this isn't really an option given the nature of Likens' core business. So tell me a little bit, I'll let you respond to this, because you're facing a different set of challenges when it comes to the new normal.
And I was going to chime in here to say that, I think it's wonderful. I think the grass is always greener. Everybody has always wanted to work from home, but we're an essential business. So we're providing that fuel to fire, EMS, the military. There's been some military tent hospitals set up, and we're there providing that propane and fuel to get those set up. So we didn't have the option to send everybody home. The majority of my workforce are drivers that are in the truck delivering fuel. They have to be in the truck delivering fuel. Our office team members, most of them need to be here as well to help get everything accomplished for these guys. We were able to send some people home, but that was the hurdle that we had to cover and get over compared to some of the other companies. I'm kind of jealous of you guys, to be honest with you a little bit, that we had to keep people here in the office. So what are we going to do to provide to change our normal routine on a day-to-day basis, from one door that everybody comes in, your temperature's taken, you're asking some COVID-19 questions as soon as you arrive, at all of our locations. So those were the obstacles and some of the hurdles that we had to cross, and even providing materials, sanitizing materials for our trucks every day. That's been a hurdle for us, is getting the supplies that we need. But we've accomplished it. And so, yeah, there's definitely two sides of the story here, and you guys have accomplished that, but there's been some extra hurdles here that we've had to overcome by just having people here on a day-to-day basis and providing to all of our customers.
Great perspective. And I think we could just sit in the macro view for an entire hour, but there's still more that we want to cover. So let's move on. If you have questions, again, go ahead and submit them. We'll catch it on the back end. Now I want to delve into more of the lessons learned. The great thing about, personally working with both you, Zach, and Jill, is that I know that you guys have been very active in getting, creating the feedback channels that your employees need, and you've been very quick to analyze the data that you've collected. You've taken action on that. So I want to spend some time talking about, you know, what surprises have you had? Clearly, some things work in this kind of crisis mode. You have to act quickly. And I think for the most part, you know, there really isn't any wrong answer or action, given that you are responding to your employee needs. But I'm curious as to, you know, have there been any surprises that from your employees based on the action that you've taken? What are some of the lessons learned there? Zach, let's go ahead and start with you. I'm going to keep picking on you.
Sure. So lessons learned. You know, throughout this whole process, it's definitely been that open line of communication. We've utilized Workify and had some great feedback from our employees. So communication to us has been a paramount point, along with the communication from us. So definitely the communication point, fast acting, and to be a little self-serving here, the idea of having to learn and comprehend new laws and regulations that are changing almost on a day-to-day basis has been a lesson learned for us here on how we get that communication out to people, those technology paths that we've used, and really the feedback that we've gotten has been great to hear, that in the fact that every employee has almost said verbatim, we've exceeded their expectations. The word's out on the street even on what all we're doing for our employees, what we've provided, and how we've really captivated that culture that Likens provides as a family business, in caring for each and one of our employees and their families throughout this whole process. So it's been a neat experience in that sense.
Yeah, earlier in one of our conversations, Zach, you mentioned that, you know, you guys early on you pulled the trigger on getting some resources, and you got some supplies, but you know there was a view that maybe you could have done a little more. Tell me more about that. What were some of the lessons learned there?
Yeah. So we pulled the trigger. So like I said earlier, our disaster response team right at the get-go started meeting every day. Some of those supplies that, you know, each one of our facilities, so we have multiple states, multiple facilities, getting the supplies there, from sanitizing dispensers to disinfecting wipes to spray and things like that, thermometers. That was a giant obstacle for us. The ear covers for thermometers, or the probe covers to take the temperatures, have been a huge obstacle for us to overcome through this whole process. And the fact that the communication on what's being required, and what's been amazing is the buy-in from the employees. They realize the situation and understand what we're doing, and want to be part of it, and want to stop the spread of this COVID-19, and be a partner in crime. As we've been partnering with our state officials and partnering with our local officials, our employees have really been a huge partner in this whole process as well. So it's been good.
Jill, anything to add here?
I think probably, again, like lots of people on the call, we sent out, it was interesting, the first couple of weeks when we worked from home, it was almost like a novelty. And people hadn't yet found their rhythm. And we knew that if we put a survey out in week 1 or 2, the results that we got might be different than they were in 4 or 5. And I think that goes on into weeks 9, 10, whatever. But when we put the survey out, got the data back, there were 2 things I think that surprised us more than anything. One was the degree of and the level of guilt that our working moms and dads were going through. Who had kids at home that they now needed to homeschool, and who told us they felt they were doing a poor job at both. Please help. And whilst there wasn't a prescription that we could give out to solve the issue for all of them, we changed some of the core working hours. We talked about meetings not being held at particular times, so that those folks could concentrate potentially on helping the kiddos. The other one that surprised us, I think, and with hindsight, maybe it shouldn't have done, we paid particular attention to our employees who are living on their own. Part of their joy of going into a workplace is the socialization aspect, and all of a sudden that's been removed from them. You can get some of that, a lot of that through Zoom, etc. We have paid significant attention to those people, and one of the things that we've done in our HR team, we have HR folks across our 4 sites. We have done drop-offs. So when an HR person in a site has a few hours spare a day, what they've done is they've gotten in their car with cookies or with beer, actually, most of the time.
Love it.
On people's doorsteps from a distance, then we take a picture of them. And that has, I think, made an enormous difference to everybody that we've done it with, but specifically those individuals who are on their own. The other thing that we do with those folks is we do a daily checklist. We've only have 400 employees, so it's relatively straightforward to do, but who's been spoken to last? So we can continually monitor how people are doing. Now, say that, week 7, a new normal has been established. And so I know that if I put out a survey this week or next week, Stephen, you're going to say, don't expect the same results because I'm not going to get them. So I'm sure there will be more surprises to come as well.
Yeah, just to add to this, I think one of the biggest surprises that I've had and we've had is just kind of this emergence of mental health. And, it's honestly something that hasn't been talked a lot about, particularly in the workplace. But I think that the nature of, how drastic the changes have been, the different, Zach, you mentioned earlier, the grass is always greener. Like as an employee, like I think, I hate my commute and I hate to have to, be in the office in the physical location from this time to that time. But that kind of gets flipped upside down. And, a blind spot for me is how much I need, the human interaction. And I think that's really kind of uncovered, this broader, issue of mental health and, some of the things that get triggered for some people, all people, that's probably something that could be debated, but that's been a huge surprise for me. And I hope that, as we, whatever the new normal is or the next phase of this, that's something that, we can continue to show empathy and compassion for as practitioners and as employers. So moving on, the next area of focus is, we've already talked a little bit about, hindsight, but, specifically, I do know that we've tried things, that we've all tried things and they haven't all worked so well. And I'm just curious if there are any examples of things that you wish you would have done differently in kind of the initial phases or kind of even in the last few weeks. Is there anything that, knowing what you now know, that you would do a little differently? And this time we'll start with Jill.
Zach alluded to it earlier, and I don't know if there's anything that we could have done differently, but the challenge to get our arms around the various legislation and the bills that was coming out was hard. And I shout out to all of our partners and brokers and lawyers out there who were reading documentation 10 minutes ahead of us, and I'm asking them questions. Done that differently, or we could have predicted something differently there, but certainly in week 3 and 4, most of the time of a few of us on the HR team was spent understanding what we may or may not be eligible for as an organization with regards to any incentives or breaks that may have been out there. I think that we've allowed ourselves to say, try everything. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. And so what we've done is we have upped communication to the extent, actually, that I got a Slack message the other day from somebody saying it's too much. I think too much is too much. But we have been doing we for the first 3 or 4 weeks we did Q&As every single day via Slack. Our CEO Chuck has been doing videos every week, sometimes from his garden, sometimes from the office. Sometimes they're lighthearted, other times they're more somber approach. Every time we're giving a business update as well. We've hosted 4 or 5 manager Q&As, and we've talked explicitly in those Q&As during those webinars about empathy, about mental health. We've allowed people to get very vulnerable when they've wanted to. And so there have been some things that we've tried. Every week we've had Spirit Week, so we're doing something different every week. Some of those have fallen flat and people have told us that, and we've said, okay, we won't try that again. But for the most part, I would say to any HR leader and any HR person out there or any manager out there, I would just say keep trying, because I don't think there's, I think it's about the effort. I think it's about keeping people tethered. And if there were 1,000 ideas that people had, I'd read every single one and say, let's try 200. I really do.
And that's one of the reasons why we love working with you so much, Jill. It's I love that notion of, what we could have done differently, if anything, is, tried more, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's great. And it's hard to, especially I feel as human resources practitioners, it can be very easy to kind of beat ourselves up because we want to do so much and we want to get it right. And so, being gentle on ourselves and each other, I think is mm-hmm. important. Zach, is there anything that you want to share from a hindsight perspective that you believe could have been done differently?
Yeah, so I agree with Jill that the regulations that were coming down was probably the hardest thing, and what could I do differently? I don't know. Have a lawyer sitting next to me at my desk and share my desk with them. Maybe that was about the only way I could have accomplished that one a little bit better. But maybe I take a little bit of a different perspective on it, that, how many times do we as HR professionals go out of our way and do all these things, and we think that we're doing the right thing for the company, for the culture, and then the feedback from employees is okay, but maybe not where we thought it was going to be. Maybe it was at a 6 and we're like, gosh, we really thought that was at an 8. So throughout this whole process, we as Lycans have done so many things from multiple levels. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people working from home, but there's few people. We are doing virtual happy hours in the evening for those people. But here, those people coming to the office, we have provided, we're now at week 8, lunch to every employee, no matter what state you're in, from a local restaurant provided by Lycans every single day. So we're trying to kind of do the inverse of that. But we have so many drivers that what's so cool about this is the word's out on the street on what we've done, and people are talking about Lycans, and man, I wish I was working at Lycans, and I wish that I could be part of that team. So that's where my different perspective is I don't know if it's a negative looking back on what I could have done differently, but maybe it's a time that we as HR and as a leadership team of the company can give ourselves a pat on the back and say, man, maybe we did a good job. Maybe we did get a great team together, and give kudos to everyone in the HR team for what they've done. But I think we've done a pretty good job here. I'm sure there's something that I'm missing, or maybe there's a large gap that I needed to work on or do differently, but we've done a pretty good job here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Now let's shift gears a little bit and let's start to look forward. Again, one of the luxuries of gathering employee feedback and being open to opening up those conversations with your employees, which can be very daunting in uncertain times like this. But both Lycans and Storable have done so and made that a priority. I know you guys have taken quick action. I know you've done multiple cycles of gathering feedback. And so I'm just curious, what you can share with our audience today in terms of what are some of the themes and the emerging trends that some of the new areas of focus that you're starting to shift your attention to. Jill, I know we've had a couple of conversations around this, but I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, from a macro standpoint, very practical standpoint, we are now debating what a return to work might look like to being in a kind of gathering school. And so a lot of work is going into
some feedback.
So a lot of work is now going into kind of what that space might look like going forward. That's on a very practical standpoint. From a more sort of cultural standpoint, people's standpoint, what we're talking about is the dialogue that we will have with our managers going forward in terms of how they will connect with their people. I think all of our managers have
Emailed it Florida.
Thank you. I was muted for a little bit there. They've been delivered.
Sorry, Jill. I was trying to address the feedback.
No, you're fine. So what we've talked about is how the training that we offer and the dialogues that we offer with our managers is probably going to alter. We're going to use this to. We've already used it to talk about change management, to talk about empathy, to talk about vulnerability in the workplace. From that, what we'll do is develop, I think, a very different sort of curriculum. We had already begun to talk with many of our leaders and directors about conscious leadership and our expectation of them in the workplace. I believe that expectation has it's gone up every week. And every week, when I think we've done enough, I'll shoot them a note in a tribes channel or a leadership channel and say, what next? What more? What more? And it's interesting, the our business, the sort of the brand behind the brand, when we say storable, we talk about doing more for our clients, doing more for our industry, doing more for our employees. And so I think what we've seen is that we're actually raising the bar on leadership, which is pivoting towards a much more kind of empathetic style. And I believe that will be remembered. I know that's going to be remembered by our people, by their families, by their friends. And I honestly believe that will put distance between some employers and others who have potentially either not been able or have not wanted to be as empathetic during this process.
That's amazing. I think looking forward, we one of the top trending areas that we see in the COVID-19 pulse surveys that our clients are doing. And as a follow-up, if any attendees are interested in gaining access to the COVID-19 pulse survey templates, feel free to reach out to us. It's part of the resources that we're offering, all companies. But one of the number one trending themes that we see is the engagement indicator of management. We're seeing a trend that now that we've had some weeks to work through this new remote working or this different working model than what we had before, things like manager one-on-ones, they're not happening in a regular cadence as they once were. Employees are maybe getting the leadership communication that they need from company-wide, but they're not having those one-on-one touch points and getting the direct communication from their manager. And so I think it's really smart, and it's in line with the data that we see, Jill, to start focusing on, some of the training. Also, some of the I guess responses, as managers, we have never been trained. Just like earlier, a comment was made, I think by Zach, that there's no global pandemic, checkbox, in the response kind of management toolkits. Similarly, in the manager skill set, there's no competency that is global pandemic, crisis management response. And there are some more interpersonal components of, the manager competencies that companies typically focus on. But, we see emerging that there is a need for training, and it's great to hear that Storable's looking at that. Zach, I'm curious, are there any, what are you starting to shift your focus to?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest things is what I mentioned earlier is that when I was talking about kind of patting ourselves on the back a little bit, is that word's out on the street about lichens. So I think there's times that we can kind of maybe during these times, I think all companies need to be a little bit more on the offense and take advantage of some of these opportunities. So we've really looked at all this feedback that we're getting from non-employees and the phone ringing off the hook about wanting to join our team and what they hear about what Likens is doing. So we've actually redone our website and our career page to create a whole section to capture those employees. We're all about the culture here. And so we want to start that line of communication with those employees right now. Just as most companies are in the same boat, we're really not in a big push to hire a bunch of people right now. We want to make sure that we keep everybody and their families safe and secure during these times. But let's capture the audience that's looking to want to come on board, that hears about us, that already we have a great reputation with them, and start that communication, make them feel part of the family right now. So as soon as we want to bring them on board, they're ready to go and maybe partly trained in a way and have an idea of what our culture is here, because that's a lot about of who we are and how we treat our employees. So I think that's one of the biggest things for us here at Likens that we've seen and looked at. I know Jill was talking about some of the training and stuff that they're doing. So we've kind of gone down that same path as well with the few employees that are working from home and their managers on how they use that empathy and what tools do we have to create that line of communication, that open communication with those employees about setting expectations right from the get-go. Because this working from home is a new thing for us. This was nothing that Likens had ever done before. We created this from the get-go, from policies and procedures to actually having to purchase a bunch of laptops and computers to send people home with. So we're in uncharted territory, but we've really worked with those managers during this time to help them through, to guide those employees to be the best employee that they can and to provide the best service they can while they're at home.
Awesome, and that's a great segue to our last section of the day, at least for the planned discussion topics, and then I'm going to throw a couple of curveballs at you guys before we open it up for Q&A. This notion of shifting your focus, many leaders believe that, even in the most difficult times, the most difficult markets, down markets, there's an huge opportunity to find areas that you can seize, market opportunities that you can seize upon. And I'm just curious, your views on, can companies start to play offense? We've kind of had to all retrench, and we've all had to move into kind of this defensive position of getting through this really horrible situation with COVID-19. As we begin to emerge, many believe that, the companies that shift to a more proactive, more offense way of looking at the market will have huge opportunities to make gains. And so I'm interested in your views as to how this will manifest from an HR standpoint. And Jill, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about it from sort of two aspects. One is from a branding and employer value proposition kind of standpoint. I mentioned earlier that how we treat our people through this process, there is no doubt in my mind that it will be remembered. We are already seeing candidates ask us, because we are still hiring, albeit significantly less numbers than we were before, but we're asking, we've had candidates ask us, how are you working through this? What are you doing with your people? And clearly they're comparing our responses to other employers that they might be talking to. The other thing that we've done is we've been very, we're doing a LinkedIn campaign about the things that we're actually doing with our people, and unsolicited, a lot of our people have actually put activities that they've been involved in with us during this process onto LinkedIn, followers, etc. I've got no doubt, I have no doubt that this is helping us from an employer brand standpoint, and will enable us, I believe will enable us to have healthier pipelines than maybe we've had before in some of our cities. The second aspect I was thinking of as you were talking, Stephen, was kind of more about the micro of kind of HR. I've been fortunate enough to be at companies during my life, both here and in other countries, where my CEO and the senior team looked at me and said, okay, help. And I haven't been somebody that's had necessarily to fight for the HR voice at the table. And so I've been very fortunate in that regard. However, during the last 7 to 8 weeks, or maybe extend it to 10 as we kind of came up to this, never, I think, have HR been so needed and required to lead. And I think if there was any HR person or an HR person that's a little more junior in their career, this is when I say to them, come on, this is our opportunity. And
yes. Yeah.
you know, if there is an HR person out there today that's still a little tentative and still's like, I don't know if I've got the voice the same way that the COO does or the CFO does, this is seriously, this is our moment to shine. This is our moment to say, this is what we do. You know, we are as good in a crisis as we are at any other time. But this is when I've seen my HR team rise up like champions, absolute champions. I mean, it has made me as an HR leader so incredibly proud. And so I think I think of it from two levels. I think HR, we have an opportunity as well as kind of the broader kind of brand opportunity.
Yeah, I mentioned in our session, our preparation session, that one of the trending list of interview questions from candidates is, how is your company responded to COVID-19, and what change did you guys implement as a result? And I just thought, like, wow, like this, and these are not the things that you think about as a brand, as you're going through the process of reacting and responding. But I think it goes to show, like, this situation is so unique in that it has impacted everyone. It's impacted all of us. And so we all have a personal reaction to what's going on, from a workplace. So many employees have been furloughed. And so I think it's a bold question to ask by candidates, but I think it's a relevant and justified question to ask. And I think it's also going to provide a great opportunity for the companies that are really doing the best and putting themselves out there for their employees to really shine. And I love that being a career HR person, we've always talked about having a seat at the table, and I'll segue to Zach here by sharing a great I posted this event to my LinkedIn, and the CTO of Lycans Energy actually shared and gave Zach a shout out, Zach and the HR team, because this isn't this is a we situation, but gave a shout out to the HR team and everything they've done. And so it really has been amazing to watch. And so to wrap up our planned discussion topics, Zach, what are some of the ways that you see, in addition to what you've already shared, how companies can invest in playing offense?
Yeah, I kind of maybe jumped the gun in talking about it earlier, but yeah, so the idea of the website and taking advantage of this opportunity when our branding that we're doing as the HR team can get a good pipeline of employees for us that are ready and willing. And from my perspective, again, starting that line of communication right now. And I think this is an opportunity, and I've talked with my team about it, is that this is an opportunity for us as an HR team to show everybody what we're about and what we're here for, even though we do it on a day-to-day basis. But let's toot our horn a little bit. How often does HR get to toot your horn and to give yourselves a pat on the back of what all you've done? We're typically that guy at the back of the line, the last person to get the food at a company event, and we're the ones running around making sure everything else is taken care of. So this is our time to give ourselves a pat on the back. But yeah, I don't know if I have a lot more of the offense, but I'll give my team a shout out. So thanks for the plug. But I do have the greatest team. I'll go up with anybody else of the best HR team out here, but they've done a great job throughout this entire process.
Excellent. Well, before we jump into the questions, and we have a handful of questions that I'm looking at here, I guess do you have any kind of parting words or advice for the listeners in terms of kind of what best practices you're implementing to kind of stay ahead of your employee situation, employee feedback, and positioning yourselves and your HR departments to take action on kind of the latest and greatest kind of situation that's going on with your people? What are some of the what's your advice to those listening in terms of what they can do?
I think, again, the situation that we're in at Storable, very different from Zach, but what's sort of forefront right now is the return to work. And I think as we've done our research, as we've looked at best way to return to work in terms of how to organize an office, et cetera, I'm leaning towards how to minimize the amount of change curves I inflict upon, we call our people stories, that we inflict upon our stories. And so my advice, and I have two terrific lieutenants that work with me, and where we're sort of coalescing around is, don't make a decision too soon. And it's not necessarily about not wanting to make a decision, but just because a mayor or a county, a judge or a governor says, away we go, ultimately it's our business, because we're non-essential workers. It's our business that makes that call. And I don't want to be heard like. And I think we should be brave in our decision making and ensure that even if there is pressure from others within our organization or industry or peer group, that we as an HR leadership community are continuing to lead through the uncertainty, and still being brave and still ensuring that the voices of our employees is absolutely front of center, more so than a government official. That's kind of where what is forefront right now.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And Zach, what are your kind of final thoughts on how companies can stay ahead?
So I think that here at Likens, we've really used this as a learning opportunity. So we are an essential business. So what comes next? What is there COVID-20? Is there COVID-21 or what's going to happen? So what can we do to protect ourselves going forward? So we are looking at things. So for instance, I mean, some of the list of items here I can kind of go through to give people some ideas is changing faucets to touchless faucets. We're putting touchless hand dryers in. All of our doors we're changing to automatic doors. Some of the interior ones we're putting foot pulls on. We have some cubicles that have glass on top. We're going to probably lengthen that glass so it's a little bit higher. Looked at some robots, some UV robots that'll roam the building at night to sanitize it at night. An automated screening system. All the employees are now required to enter the building through one door. So putting an automated kind of tunnel in, for lack of better terms, that takes your temperature and does some other things. So why not? Why stop when this is over? If it's going to be a best practice for us, we have DOT drivers that follow certain protocols, Department of Transportation protocols. We've now changed their pre and post trip paperwork that requires them to disinfect the cab of the truck. And we're going to continue that going forward. Why not? The flu, the virus, a stomach bug, that'll help keep it away from us. We've removed chairs out of conference rooms. There's actually visual signage on where you can sit at a conference room table, vinyl stickers on the floor, directional arrows in our office. These are things that maybe got brought to the forefront right now, but they're great best practices for us to move forward that we're going to continue to keep us safe and healthy. And wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to worry about the flu season next year even?
So keep learning and keep changing is what I'm hearing. So excellent. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. I see a handful of questions here. And so first question, I believe, is for Jill. The question is, interested to know how she gathered the intel as to who lived alone. And so how were you guys able to capture that information?
We asked people in the survey that we put out. Obviously, it's not immediately evident when you go into your HRIS system. And so when we realized that that was fraud, we asked people and we said, you don't have to tell us. But I think probably everybody that did told us. And we didn't know why. We had, Stephen, as you know, because you helped us put the survey together, we had maybe 20 questions in the survey. And that was one of the questions as we realized that, gosh, they might need more. And they told us that they did. But yes, we just asked.
So you included that as part of your survey design and were able to identify that. Yeah. That's great. Next question I have is, and I'm not sure who this is directed to, but I'll allow one of you to pick it up if you can. Do you have examples of what you've done for Spirit Week? And Spirit is capitalized.
I'm happy to share. I've got hundreds. And so I'm really happy, Stephen, I can send to you, and Zach, I'm sure you've got them too, but we've had 7 weeks of Spirit Week. And some of them have been better than others. We've had, for example, dress up like Astoria, show us your favorite workstation, show us your favorite co-worker. This week is our first ever Storable International Film Festival. So we're having people submit films, but Stephen, I'll send you the list. I'm more than happy to share because we have 3 office coordinators for our offices, and they have been instrumental in keeping our community together. So Stephen, I'll send you a list afterwards to be shared with everybody here. Great.
Stephen, I'll chime in a little bit on that one. So we haven't done Spirit Week, but we have internal TVs at all of our locations and a method to send actual video text messages to all of our employees. And our managers have all stepped up in what I would call video selfies. And so almost on a weekly basis from our managers across the board, they send HR video selfies, and we have been putting those on the TVs for their respective areas and locations, and then sending it out to their respective employees via text. And it's been great, kind of like a Spirit, but it's all coming from the manager. And it's been funny stories that people in the mower, people in their car, on their back deck, drinking a glass of wine, really intimate and from the heart. So it's been really good. It's been fun.
It has been fun to see people in their own element, in their natural habitat, so to speak. Another question
Stephen,
here. Okay, yes.
Just one other that I think has really resonated because it kind of tugged at the heartstrings. We asked our employees to tell us who their heroes were, whether they had, their mom is a nurse, or their husband working in an ER, or their son is delivering, UPS parcels. And so we have about 35 Storia heroes. And this week in the film festival, we're doing a shout out and calling out all of those people in a video. Storia's just saying thank you to them. And I read through the script and some of it the other day, and it tugs at the heartstrings.
If you can share that, that would be amazing.
I will.
To see as well. Next question. Thank you for this opportunity. You're very welcome. Wondering any advice or observations regarding employees who are new to working remotely. Zach, you mentioned this being really different for you all. So why don't we start with you? And it looks like Julie may have some advice here also.
Sure. Yeah. So specifically at the kind of employee manager, employee engagement aspect. So when we decided to go down this route of sending some people home, we worked with all of our managers on the differentiation between an employee who sits, right down the hall from you to via video conference, and that the level of empathy, consideration, and then really setting those expectations off from day one. If the expectations aren't set, I really feel that there's going to be some conflict, maybe some miscommunication along the line. So there was one-on-one meetings with those people who went home with their manager face-to-face prior to leaving about setting those expectations on those check-ins. What's going to be asked of them? How are they going to document it? How are we going to track the progress and the work that they're doing? So that forework, the extra forework that you do really will play off in the end is what we have found. And I think Jill will say the same thing. It's the communication is the biggest aspect on what you have to work through and just set up on what method of communication, if that's verbal, if that's group chats, if that's Teams, I don't know what platform you use, or Slack, something like that you can use with your team members.
Jill, what are your thoughts here? Any advice?
I would echo what Zach has said. Just set the expectation for communication, just descriptive. But yeah, echo what Zach says.
And now that we're in the thick of it, the only thing that I would add is that you may want to ask via a pulse survey. There are a variety of different tools out there. Again, I mentioned that we have some templates that you could use that will help you get feedback on what's working and what's not working. Whether it's specific to remote working or how you can make it better. I think this is a great time to ask your employees and get some feedback from them directly. Next question. We have, let's see here, a question for Jill. You were talking about conscious management training that you're offering to your leadership team. Are you hiring consultants to help with that, or is the HR team providing these trainings? Any recommended resources on this topic? Great question.
I'm happy to connect again, Stephen, with anybody on the call. No, I'm fortunate enough to have many years of HR experience under my belt, I'll put it that way. And for a long time, I specialized in learning and development and organizational development. And I hired a guy last year that Stephen knows very well by the name of Sam Baber. Some of you on the call might know Sam. Sam and I together have constructed what we've called conscious leadership, aka tribes. And we have done that with 360s. We're using the Berkman profile, and then we've written a 2-day event that is all about conscious leadership. It's been quite remarkable. I love to do that kind of thing anyway, as does Sam, and us doing it together has created something I think quite unique for our business. And we do have this mission to elevate leadership over and above what we've ever seen before. I'm really happy, Stephen, for you to share details on that, and then I can connect afterwards.
Great. So yeah, I'm seeing a couple questions here regarding the survey questions. We will we'll share all of our contact information and how you can get access to those. And it's a no strings attached deal. We're happy to share these questions. Really quickly, I'm gonna move through a couple of others. I have a question here again for Jill. How did you find out? We've already answered that one. How did you find out? Who was living alone? I think that might be all of the questions. The last thing that I will say in 1 minute or less, I want to thank our panelists again. Zach, Jill, you guys were amazing. I want to thank the audience for joining us today and being patient with some technical challenges there with the muting. This is a great session and a great conversation. The last thing I want to do is just encourage you guys to continue putting yourselves out there and getting feedback from your people. We see an overwhelming amount of activity with our clients and employee feedback. And while it can be scary, it's important that we're of service. And so thank you all for joining. For those that are interested, we'll also share a recording of this session, and we hope you can make it to our next webinar series. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone stay safe and healthy.